The palace of Ardelia was alive that night, glowing under lanterns that floated in the velvet sky. Musicians played soft melodies across the courtyard, servants hurried with silver trays, and noblemen in jeweled robes gathered in whispers of politics and power. The annual moon festival had begun, and with it came the rare chance for commoners to step inside the royal walls, to see the grandeur of the kingdom up close. But for Lyra, a woman with eyes like midnight storms and a determination carved into her bones, this night was not about lanterns or music. It was about the king. She had waited years for this opportunity. Rumors had always painted King Darius as untouchable, a man of discipline, strength, and mystery, a ruler both feared and admired, known for leading battles with courage and ruling with wisdom. But to Lyra, he was more than a figure of power. He was a man she had dreamed of meeting, not as a queen, not as a wife, just for one night. Lyra wasn't naive. She knew the weight of what she desired. She didn't seek a throne, nor riches, nor the title of consort. She wanted something far more dangerous, a single night in the presence of a man the world only saw from afar, a night to peel away the crown and see the human beneath it. Disguised in a gown of emerald silk borrowed from her wealthy employer, she slipped past the gates with the other townsfolk. Her beauty drew glances, but it was her composure that set her apart. She walked not like a servant, but like someone who belonged. Her dark hair was braided intricately, her lips painted with crimson, and though her heart thundered, her stride was steady. The king appeared just before the feast. He descended the marble steps in black and gold, a crown of iron resting lightly on his head. Conversations hushed as every eye turned toward him. His presence was commanding, broad shoulders, steady gaze, a man who carried the weight of nations in every step. When his eyes swept across the crowd, they paused, just briefly, on Lyra. She held her breath, her lips curving into the faintest smile. A spark lit in his gaze, one he quickly veiled as he continued forward. The night unraveled with dances and toasts, laughter echoing through the courtyard. Lyra stayed on the edges, watching, waiting, biding her time. She noticed the advisors whispering at his side, the way he dismissed them with the smallest gestures. She noticed how his smile was polite but never touched his eyes. The king was surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. It wasn't until the hour grew late that her chance came. Servants hurried about, replacing empty goblets, when Lyra slipped into their midst, carrying a tray. She approached the dais where the king sat, towering over the gathering. When she reached him, she bowed low and whispered as she set down his cup, "I ask not for your crown, nor your riches, only a night to know the man beneath the king." His hand froze on the goblet. For a moment, silence pressed heavy. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in intrigue. He looked at her fully then, studying her face as though weighing the truth of her words. He leaned closer, his voice so low only she could hear. "Do you know what you ask?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. A dangerous smile touched his lips. "Then follow." He rose abruptly, his sudden movement drawing curious glances, but with a single wave of his hand, he silenced any questions. He led her through corridors few had seen, past guards who bowed without question, until they reached a chamber lit only by the flickering light of torches. Inside, the grandeur was stripped away. No throne, no audience, just stone walls and silence. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone commanding. "Someone who doesn't want your power," she said softly. "Someone who wants to see if the man behind the crown still remembers what it feels like to be human." For the first time that night, his mask cracked. His laughter was low, incredulous, tinged with weariness. "Everyone wants something from me. Land, wealth, favor. Why should I believe you are different?" "Because I will ask for nothing tomorrow," she said. "Not even your name." The king studied her, his gaze searching. He was a man used to betrayal, to plots disguised as flattery, to daggers hidden behind smiles. Yet there was no fear in her eyes, no greed, only honesty. The hours slipped by as they spoke. He told her of battles fought, not in detail, but in fragments, the silence of camps before dawn, the sting of loss, the burden of every decision that cost lives. She listened not as a subject, but as a woman who wanted to understand. She asked him what made him laugh as a child, what dreams he had before duty chained him to the throne. He found himself answering, not out of obligation, but because her presence drew truth from him. And she, in turn, shared her story, a childhood in the shadow of poverty, a life of servitude, a longing for something greater than survival. She told him she did not want to marry a rich man, or live in luxury. She wanted one night where she could touch a world that seemed so far from her own. The king listened, his hardened face softening in the glow of torchlight. When dawn neared, he rose and looked at her with something close to regret. "You asked for a night, and I gave it, but you have taken more from me than I expected." She tilted her head. "And what is that?" He stepped closer, his voice low, heavy with something he rarely confessed. A piece of myself I thought I had buried. Lyra smiled faintly. Then I have kept my promise. Tomorrow, I will vanish. You owe me nothing. But as the first rays of light broke through the high windows, the king made a decision that would change both their fates. You may leave if you wish, he said, his tone steady, but if you stay, you will not just have had a night with the king. You will have a place at his side. Her heart thundered, torn between the life she had always known and the dangerous possibility of something greater. She had come seeking only a fleeting moment. But now, the king had offered her a future. Yet futures built on thrones were not without shadows. That very morning, word spread through the palace that enemies were closing in, betrayals within the court, plots to dethrone him, whispers of poisoned wine and hidden daggers. The king's enemies had been watching, waiting, and Lyra's sudden presence gave them reason to strike. She was accused of seduction, of treachery, of being a spy planted to weaken him. Guards stormed the chamber, dragging her before the council. Her emerald gown, once her disguise, now marked her as a temptress in their eyes. The king rose against them, his voice thundering. She is under my protection. But whispers spread like wildfire. His advisors begged him to cast her out, to preserve his reputation, to prove his strength. For the first time, Lyra saw the crown's true burden. To choose her meant risking his throne. She lifted her chin and spoke before he could. Release me. Let them believe I deceived you. A king must not fall for a woman like me. But his eyes never wavered. You asked for one night, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. I will give you more. Not as a king forced into duty, but as a man who chooses. Gasps rippled through the council, shock painted on their faces. The king had defied them all. From that day forward, their story became legend. Not of a queen who sought power, nor of a king who gave into weakness, but of a night that turned into a bond neither betrayal nor politics could sever. Lyra had wanted only a night with the king, but what she found was a man willing to give her forever. And in the quiet moments, when the palace was silent and the crown rested forgotten on the table, he would remind her of that first whisper. You came to me asking for a night, he would say, holding her close, but you gave me back my soul. And she would smile, knowing that what began as a stolen night had become the kind of story kingdoms would remember for centuries.